Imagine boarding a plane with your heart full of hope, excited for a new chapter in your life, only to be stopped cold. Not because of your ticket, but because of the color of your skin. This is the story of Lyric and Janelle Parker, twin sisters whose journey to Boston for a college visit becomes a battleground against silent but powerful forces of discrimination. Their father, Everett Parker, is the CEO of the airline, but even that does not shield them from the cold dismissals, invasive questioning, and outright denial of the dignity every passenger deserves. Why were these young women treated as outsiders in a place where they should have felt safe? How far will their courage push a massive airline to confront uncomfortable truths about bias and systemic injustice? And what price will they and the airline industry pay for standing up to long-held prejudices? As we follow their story unfolding high above the clouds and then on the ground, we invite you to ask yourself, how often does discrimination go unnoticed in places where it shouldn't? What would you do if it happened to you or someone you loved? If you believe in justice, dignity, and the power of courage to ignite change, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Let's dive into Lyric and Janelle's fight for fairness and the transformation they sparked. You girls are in the wrong place. Coach is back there. Carla Renshaw's voice cut across the boarding area without her even looking up. In that sudden hush, the echo of her words lingered, pressing down on the two sisters like heavy fog. The line of passengers behind Lyric and Janelle Parker shifted forward as if propelled by some invisible force. Everyone else seemed to move on without hesitation. Only the twins remained rooted to the spot, their first-class tickets clutched in trembling hands. The airport lights glowed cool against the polished floor of Dallas Wash Fort Worth International. It was early morning, but the twin sisters had already been awake for hours. Their mother's hug before they left home still warmed them. Their father's instructions had been clear. Fly safely. Be polite. These tickets were a gift and a privilege. But privilege, they were learning, could be fragile. Lyric Parker, 16, wore her dark curls in two neat buns. Her skin glowed softly under the fluorescent lights. She stared at Carla's back without blinking. Politeness was her shield. She squared her shoulders, fought the tremor in her voice, and said, "We have first-class seats. Our boarding passes say row 1, seats A and B." Her words floated in the air while Carla typed away on her tablet. Beside her, Janelle Parker's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She bit her lip to keep from shouting. All morning she had envisioned settling into those cushioned leather seats with a cup of juice and a magazine. Instead, she felt invisible, unworthy, unseen. Her student ID hung from a lanyard around her neck. 16 years old and already accustomed to proving her existence over and over again. Carla Renshaw did not look up. Her fingers tapped the screen as if the twins were a mere nuisance to clear. "Your boarding isn't until the back of the plane. First-class boards after Zone 3. Her tone was clipped, final. She handed their passes back without eye contact. The girls stared at the glossy paper. Printed right there in bold letters was the word first. Lyric swallowed. She took a steadying breath. She would not crumble. Her voice remained calm when she spoke. "The airline's policy says first-class passengers board first. We were next in line." The line behind them grew restless. A few travelers glanced their way, eyebrows raised. Nobody spoke up. Nobody intervened. Janelle's internal temperature rose. Rage burned behind her ribs, but she forced herself to remain silent. She had seen her sister handle confrontations dozens of times. Lyric's voice was a quiet anchor. When Lyric spoke, they listened. At least sometimes they did. Hearing Carla's muffled dismissal, should have made Janelle collapse in tears, but instead her rage sharpened. The twins moved forward only when Carla waved them on with a dismissive flick of her wrist. Her look of annoyance was a wound inflicted with surgical precision. The two girls stepped over the threshold into a different world. Beyond it lay the grand doors of the jet bridge where other agents would wait. Lyric straightened her spine. Janelle brushed tears from her eyelashes and set her jaw. They walked side by side across the floor that reflected their every step. Each footfall hammered into Janelle's chest. She rehearsed her next words. She would ask to speak with a supervisor. She would call her father if she had to. She would show them these tickets. They belonged here. They deserved this. At the entrance of the jet bridge, a uniformed agent greeted them. Her shoulders bore shiny stripes indicating rank, yet her smile was polite, practiced. "Good morning," she said. "This is the first-class boarding area." Lyric lifted her pass. "That is where we should be," she said softly. Janelle held her breath. The agent studied the twins. She tilted her head and touched the brim of her cap. "I'm sorry," she said, "but this flight is full. First class is at capacity." Her voice was gentle, but her words were final. Cargo doors opened beyond. Mechanical sounds drifting in. A mother and her infant passed them, cooing. The twins felt a hollow ache, as if carried by a current beyond their control. Inside, the agent pressed a small button and a new pass printed out. She handed it over without comment. "Economy class, row 27. The girls accepted it as though anesthetized. Their childhoods had taught them compromise. Their precise lives at home, the honors classes, the music recitals, the volunteer work had all been steered by unseen rules. This was just another rule they were forced to learn. Lyric looked down at her new pass. A single tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. She blinked it away so quickly that nobody would notice. Janelle placed a hand on her sister's arm. They did not speak. They did not need to. They shared a look that said everything. They were together in this, and somehow they would find a way through. They stepped through the final door of the jet bridge. The cabin of the airplane appeared like a floating sanctuary of possibility and calm, but now it seemed barred. The aisle lights shone softly. Overhead bins were open for storage. Flight attendants moved down the aisle, offering smiles to incoming passengers. None offered a glance in their direction. Lyric and Janelle outfitted themselves with new passes, brave faces, steady eyes. They would board. They would take these seats even if they had to fight. And when the time came, they would remember this moment, this chill in the air, this refusal to look up. They would remember the silence that told them they were invisible. At the back of the plane, they found the seats assigned to them. Janelle glanced around. The other passengers, already settled, waved at them out of obligation. None understood. They did not have to. Lyric folded her hands in her lap. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed. Janelle watched her sister with fierce pride. Everything they had prepared for this flight seemed to boil down to a single moment. They sat down side by side. The world around them hummed with engines starting and the gentle murmur of conversation. The plane would soon taxi, climb, break through clouds, and soar above the earth, and even here, even now, the hum reminded them that beneath every journey there was a deeper truth, a truth they would not let slip away. The hum of the engines was a steady pulse beneath the cabin lights as Lyric and Janelle Parker settled into their seats in row 27. The soft fabric of the economy chairs felt coarse against their hands after the sleek leather they had expected in first class. The twins exchanged a quick glance, sharing a moment of quiet disbelief. They had spent months planning this trip, Their father, Everett Parker, had personally booked first-class tickets for them on this Stratus Jetlines flight from Dallas to Seattle. This was supposed to be their moment, a chance to feel grown up, independent, and valued. Yet here they were, shuffled to the back of the plane with no explanation. Janelle tugged at the strap of her backpack as she stared out the window. The early morning sun was just beginning to push the horizon into a pale pink glow. Her fingers tightened around her phone, wanting desperately to call their father, to tell him everything that was happening, but she hesitated. She remembered his words before they left home. Handle yourself with dignity, be patient, and call only if it's a true emergency. Lyric watched her sister, understanding the battle behind those steady eyes. She wanted to protect Janelle from disappointment, but inside she felt the sharp sting of injustice just as keenly. Her gaze swept the cabin ahead, where passengers were already buckling in, many chatting casually with flight attendants or flipping through magazines. Somewhere in the front rows were the seats they had paid for and expected. A sudden movement caught Lyric's eye as a flight attendant appeared in the aisle. Her name tag read Tasha Langley. She was tall, with a confident stride and a sharp look in her eye. Tasha glanced at the twins, her face unreadable for a moment, before offering a tight smile. "Welcome aboard," she said, voice clipped but polite. "If you need anything, let me know." Lyric nodded politely, but Janelle felt a flicker of something else, dismissal, maybe even disdain. When Tasha passed by without making eye contact, it was clear the girls were invisible to her. The twins settled into their seats, trying to ignore the swirl of confusion and hurt that built inside them. Lyric opened her backpack and pulled out a small notebook, fingers tracing the edges as if finding comfort in the familiar texture. She thought about the conversations she and Janelle had shared during their countless hours preparing for college visits. This was supposed to be the start of their next chapter, not a scene from some story about exclusion. Minutes passed, and a new announcement came over the intercom. The pilot's voice was calm but formal, welcoming passengers and sharing the weather forecast. The plane would soon taxi to the runway. Lyric looked out the window again, noticing the city shrink beneath the thickening clouds. Suddenly, Tasha returned to their row, this time with a boarding pass in hand. She crouched down to eye level, her smile thinner than before. "There's been a change," she said quickly. "Your original seats were reassigned due to a last-minute system update. These are your new seats." She held out the boarding passes. Row 27, seats D and E. Lyric accepted the passes, her fingers trembling slightly. The paper felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on her chest. "Why were our seats changed?" she asked softly. Tasha shrugged. "It's nothing personal. System errors happen." Her voice was dismissive, but there was an edge of something colder beneath it. Janelle bristled. "System errors don't move first-class passengers all the way to the back of the plane without telling them." The flight attendant's smile disappeared for a moment. "Look, there's nothing else I can do. You're on the plane. Enjoy your flight." Lyric's mind raced. This was more than a system glitch. It was a message, an invisible boundary drawn between who was allowed comfort and who was relegated to invisibility. She squeezed Janelle's hand under the armrest, grounding herself. Nearby, two white teenagers with earbuds and oversized backpacks strode past and plopped down in the front row seats the twins were supposed to occupy. They laughed easily, their carefree presence a sharp contrast to the tightening knot inside Lyric's stomach. Janelle's voice was barely a whisper. "Maybe Daddy didn't pay the bill." Lyric's heart clenched. That cruel joke cut deep. Her father had fought hard to climb the ranks and build his own legacy. He was not a man who tolerated disrespect. Yet here, under the bright fluorescent lights of an airplane cabin, their family name and status seemed meaningless. Lyric swallowed the urge to retort. This wasn't a moment for anger. It was a moment to observe, to hold fast to their dignity. She looked at the faces around her, mostly strangers, some already asleep, others absorbed in their own worlds. No one noticed them. No one offered solidarity. Janelle shifted in her seat, staring at the overhead bins. "Do you think Daddy knows this is happening?" Lyric's fingers tapped a rhythm on her notebook. She wasn't sure. He was likely deep in meetings at the Stratus Jetline's headquarters, unaware of the slow unraveling of their flight. But soon, she promised herself, he would know. And when he did, things would change. The safety demonstration began. Flight attendants moved through the cabin with practiced ease. Tasha approached again, pausing near the twins' row. She smiled but didn't stop. "If you need anything, please ask," she said. Lyric nodded but kept her eyes fixed ahead. She was already planning. This trip was not going as imagined, but it would not break them. Together, they would navigate the turbulence ahead. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, the two sisters sat side by side, holding on to the belief that the journey was far from over. Their story was just beginning. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane settled into cruising altitude. Outside the window, clouds drifted by like soft white islands floating against a vast blue sea. Inside the plane, Lyric and Janelle Parker sat quietly in row 27 economy class, their eyes scanning the expanse of seats that stretched forward. The rows of plush leather seats in first class were barely visible beyond the partition, a world apart. They had expected comfort and dignity. Instead, they felt like ghosts drifting through the aisles. The quiet hum of conversation filled the cabin, punctuated by the soft clinks of drink carts and the occasional laugh. Flight attendants moved purposefully down the aisles, their smiles warm as they greeted passengers. But when they reached the Parker twins, those smiles faded, replaced by averted eyes or hurried glances. It was the subtle kind of dismissal that cuts deeper than outright rudeness. Lyric tightened her grip on the armrest, willing herself to stay calm. She glanced at Janelle, whose fingers nervously twisted the strap of her backpack. The flicker of anger in her sister's eyes was unmistakable. Yet Lyric knew that controlled restraint would serve them better now. A few minutes later, the lead flight attendant, Rick Harmon, appeared near their row. He was a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a commanding presence. His eyes briefly met the twins, but there was no recognition, no warmth, just a professional nod. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Rick asked, voice smooth but detached. Lyric swallowed the lump in her throat and spoke steadily. "We were assigned seats in first class, but we were moved here without explanation. We'd like to understand why." Rick's gaze flicked away. "There were some last-minute adjustments due to a booking conflict. It happens all the time." His tone suggested he did not want to discuss it further. Janelle's patience snapped. "Booking conflict. But we had those tickets for months. Our father booked them directly." Rick's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Look, young ladies, I'm just doing my job. If you have a problem, you can speak to the gate agent when we land." Lyric stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "We are asking you now. It's not about a problem. It's about being treated fairly." Rick's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, a white woman in seat 26D, overhearing the exchange, interjected with a sharp tone. Why are those girls hanging around here? Shouldn't they be back with the rest of us? The comment was casual, but its intent was clear. Janelle's heart raced with fury. She stared at the woman, her voice barely a whisper. Because we belong here just as much as anyone else. Rick gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ma'am, please, let's keep things calm. The tension in the aisle thickened. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others pulling out their phones. Lyric caught several sidelong glances. The eyes that once ignored them now seemed filled with curiosity or judgment. She felt a surge of loneliness in the crowd. How easy it would be to disappear, to become just another faceless passenger. But Lyric refused. She took a breath, grounding herself. This is not about us, she said quietly but deliberately. It's about how often people like us are told we don't belong. On planes, in rooms, in history. Rick's face hardened. If you continue to cause a scene, I'll have to ask you to return to your seats. Lyric exchanged a glance with Janelle. They both knew what cause a scene really meant. Speak up and be labeled troublemakers. Stay silent and be invisible. The cruel catch-22 of their lives. As Rick turned away, Janelle's thoughts swirled. Why is it so hard to be seen as simply human? She clenched her fists beneath the tray table. Lyric's mind drifted briefly to their father, Everett Parker, CEO of Stratus Jetlines. She imagined him sitting in his glass office, miles away, surrounded by charts and numbers. Would he even know what was happening to his daughters? Right now, at 35,000 feet, would he understand the weight of every dismissive look and every word unspoken? The plane's intercom crackled to life. The captain's voice was calm, professional. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a smooth flight. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened while we reach cruising altitude. Lyric let out a slow breath. She knew the real turbulence was just beginning. Later, when the drink cart came around, the twins hoped for some small kindness. But when the flight attendant passed them by without offering water, Lyric's stomach knotted. She caught Tasha Langley's eyes for a brief moment, a flash of something unreadable there, and then averted gaze. Janelle's voice was sharp when she whispered, "Maybe they think we don't deserve a drink." Lyric shook her head, trying to steady her rising anger. She pulled out her notebook and began jotting down details, times, names, moments. She had learned that proof was power. Minutes later, Lyric approached Rick Harmon again, her voice quieter this time, but edged with resolve. "Sir, could we please speak privately? There are concerns we want to share." Rick's eyes narrowed. "Is this about the drink service?" Lyric shook her head. "It's about respect, about how we've been treated since boarding." Rick sighed, the weariness of years in customer service weighing on him. "Look, it's not personal. You just need to understand the way things work here." Lyric's pulse quickened. She wanted to ask what things meant, but before she could, Janelle spoke up from behind her. "We understand perfectly well. We've just had enough." A hush fell over the aisle. Passengers nearby turned to watch the exchange. Rick's face tightened. For a moment, Lyric saw something like regret flash across his features before he masked it with professionalism. "Fine," he said finally. "Come with me." He led them to the galley near the rear of the plane, away from curious eyes. Lyric's heart hammered. Was this a chance to be heard, or another test of endurance? Rick folded his arms. "I'm going to be honest. Your tickets caused confusion. We double-checked with the booking system and there were flags." Lyric's brow furrowed. "Flags? What kind of flags?" Rick hesitated. Security flags. I don't have the details. Janelle's eyes flashed. We've done nothing wrong. We have valid tickets, confirmation emails, everything. Rick nodded. I believe that, but from what I'm told, this isn't the first time. It's complicated. Lyric's mind raced. The twins had sensed a pattern of bias before, but hearing it confirmed was like a punch in the gut. Suddenly, the galley door opened and Claudette Monroe stepped in. Her presence was different. A quiet strength radiated from her. She smiled gently at the girls. I'm the purser on this flight, she said warmly. I want you to know. I see you, and I'm here if you need anything. Lyric blinked, surprised by the kindness in Claudette's eyes. Janelle's shoulders relaxed just a bit. For the first time on this flight, the twins felt a flicker of hope. The plane hummed steadily as it cut through clouds miles above the earth. Inside the cabin, Lyric and Janelle Parker sat side by side, trying to focus on the rhythmic thrum of the engines. The earlier exchange with Rick Harmon and the kindness from Claudette Monroe lingered in their minds like fragile threads of hope. But the weight of the day's invisible battles pressed heavily on their shoulders. Janelle stared at her lap, the discomfort building with every passing minute. Her throat was tight from swallowing back words she longed to shout out loud. Around them, passengers chatted quietly or scrolled through their devices, seemingly untouched by the tension in the twins' corner of the plane. It felt like a different world, one where belonging wasn't optional but guaranteed. A flight attendant approached their row, her expression tight but polite. It was Tasha Langley again, her steps purposeful as she pushed a cart down the aisle. She passed out bottled water and juice to passengers, offering warm smiles as she went. When she reached Lyric and Janelle, she paused but did not reach for a bottle. Lyric's eyes flicked up. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Could we have some water? Please." Tasha's gaze slid away. "There's no water left in this cart," she said quickly. "Maybe on the next round." Janelle's jaw tightened. She looked around. There were at least 5 bottles still sitting on the top shelf of the cart. They had simply been skipped. Lyric forced a smile, trying to brush off the sting. But inside, a fire was igniting. This small act of neglect was not isolated. It was part of the pattern they had been enduring all day. The subtle but clear message, you don't belong here. Minutes passed before another cart came through. This time, Janelle caught the attendant's attention. "Please," she said firmly, "we still haven't had anything to drink." Tasha sighed and finally handed them 2 bottles. "Here," she said, voice clipped. "Don't waste it." Janelle's fingers curled around the plastic. She wanted to say more, wanted to tell Tasha that respect wasn't about charity. But Lyric gently placed a hand on her sister's arm, signaling calm. The flight continued, but the tension grew thicker. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life. The captain's voice was steady, reassuring, but distant. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin our in-flight service. We appreciate your patience." Lyric felt her heart pounding. This moment, she realized, could not pass quietly. She leaned toward Janelle. "We have to speak up," she whispered. "Not just for us, for everyone who has been ignored, pushed aside, or told they don't belong." Janelle nodded, a fierce determination lighting her eyes. As the service began, Rick Harmon approached their row once more. He carried a clipboard and wore a tight smile. "Ladies, I need to speak with you about the incident earlier," he said quietly. Lyric squared her shoulders. "Yes, sir." Rick lowered his voice. "You need to understand that any disturbance can put safety at risk. We're trying to maintain order. Janelle's voice rose. "Is asking for what we paid for a disturbance." Rick's smile vanished. "You're lucky to be on this flight at all. Don't forget that." That sentence hit Lyric like a slap. Her hands clenched in her lap. The truth was clear and ugly. This was never about safety. It was about control, about deciding who deserves respect and who does not. Janelle's patience broke. She stood abruptly, startling nearby passengers. "We are not lucky. We earned these seats. Our father is the CEO of this airline. We demand to be treated with dignity." A hush fell over the cabin. Eyes turned toward them, some curious, some disapproving. Rick's face flushed red. "You're causing a scene. If you continue, I will have to file a disruption report." Lyric felt the storm rise inside her. For years she had been taught to keep quiet, to blend in. But this moment felt different. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. "I am recording," she said calmly but firmly. "Everything." Janelle joined her, pulling out her own phone. Together, they held up their devices, the glow of the screens lighting their determined faces. Rick's eyes widened. "Put those away. Recording is not allowed without permission." Lyric shook her head. "If what's happening here is wrong, people need to see it." Whispers rippled through the cabin. A few passengers began pulling out their phones, faces curious, sympathetic. From the corner of her eye, Lyric saw Claudette Monroe watching them with quiet approval. Rick backed away, clearly unsettled. The fragile calm shattered. The cabin was charged with a new energy. What had started as a quiet fight for dignity was becoming a collective awakening. Janelle's voice was steady. "We are not invisible. We exist. And we demand respect." Lyric felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. This was their moment. They had sparked something. As the flight attendant carts rolled away, Lyric and Janelle sat back down, their hands still gripping their phones tightly. The fire inside them burned brighter than ever. They were no longer alone. The cabin lights dimmed into a soft glow, casting gentle shadows over the rows of passengers nestled in their seats. Outside, the sky was a vast canvas of deep blues, peppered with stars flickering faintly in the distance. Inside, Lyric and Janelle Parker sat quietly, their phones still warm from recording the confrontation with Rick Harmon. The tension lingered, but beneath it, something new had begun, a fragile thread of hope. Just then, Claudette Monroe, the flight purser, appeared at their row. Her dark skin gleamed softly in the cabin light, and her eyes held a calm strength that seemed to radiate from within. Claudette's hair was pulled back in a neat bun, revealing lines of wisdom etched by years of experience. She offered them a small, reassuring smile and bent down to speak quietly. "I just want you both to know. I see everything. I've been in your shoes before." Lyric blinked in surprise. "You have," Claudette nodded. "More times than I can count. And I stayed silent for far too long." Janelle's voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you stay silent?" Claudette sighed softly, glancing around the cabin as if to ensure their conversation was private. "Because sometimes the cost of speaking up feels too high. Because the system tells you to accept things as they are, or you risk everything." Lyric's fingers curled tightly around her notebook. She had spent years hearing stories like this from her mother and father, stories of resilience, compromise, and quiet survival. But hearing it from someone like Claudette made the weight of those words tangible. "I don't want you to be silent," Claudette continued. "Not this time. You're brave. You're already fighting, and you're not alone." A lump rose in Lyric's throat. She wanted to ask more, to know how Claudette had found the courage to speak out. But before she could, Claudette pressed a small package into their hands. Something to keep you going. The twins exchanged glances and unwrapped it. Inside were 2 small bottles of water and a pair of granola bars. A simple kindness in the midst of so much hostility. "Thank you," Janelle said, her voice soft but sincere. Claudette smiled again. "I'm here if you need anything. Just ask." As Claudette walked away, Lyric felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was the first genuine act of allyship they had received today. A flicker of light in a long, dark day. Minutes later, as the plane cruised steadily over the landscape below, an unexpected announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay in in-flight service. Due to unforeseen circumstances, there will be a temporary hold on beverage and snack distribution. We appreciate your understanding." The cabin murmured with subdued frustration. Passengers shifted, some pulling out phones, others leaning back to rest. Lyric glanced at Janelle, noticing the way her sister's jaw clenched. They both knew what unforeseen circumstances meant here, a disruption rooted not in safety or logistics, but in something deeper. Their phones buzzed almost simultaneously. A message from their father, Everett Parker. "Stay strong. I'm working on it." The simple words were a lifeline. Lyric opened her notebook again and began jotting down details: Claudette's kindness, the flight attendant's refusal to serve water, the pilot's vague announcement. Every moment mattered. Every detail could become part of the story that would change everything. She felt a surge of determination. They had documented enough to hold the airline accountable. They would not be erased. Later, Claudette returned, this time with a quiet presence that drew the eyes of nearby passengers. She paused beside the twins. "I'm going to do what I can to support you," she said softly. "But you have to be prepared. This fight isn't easy." Lyric nodded, swallowing a rising tide of emotion. "We're ready." Janelle's hand shook slightly as she typed a message to a friend. "We need witnesses, people to hear us." The plane seemed to hold its breath, suspended between turbulence and calm. In their row, a nearby passenger watched quietly, phone in hand, recording the subtle interactions unfolding. The twins had sparked a ripple that was beginning to spread beyond their small corner of the cabin. Lyric thought of the journey ahead, not just this flight, but the battles waiting on the ground, the conversations, the headlines, the lawsuits, the slow, grinding work of change. But for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to hope that sometimes the smallest spark could ignite a flame. The plane hummed softly as it soared through the vast blue expanse. Inside the cabin, the tension that had been building for hours thickened into something almost tangible. Lyric and Janelle Parker sat side by side in their economy seats, their phones warm from hours of recording, texting, and documenting. Every word spoken, every gesture noticed, was being carefully archived in their minds and their devices. But the battle was far from over. Just then, a new figure entered the scene, a man in a sharp uniform carrying a clipboard and an air of authority. His name tag read Matt Griswold. He moved down the aisle with a confident step that demanded attention. When he reached the twins' row, he stopped and looked them over, his gaze sharp and calculating. "Good afternoon," he said, voice calm but firm. "I'm the in-flight compliance officer. I've been made aware of some irregularities concerning your boarding and seating." Lyric's heart tightened. They had faced many obstacles that day, but now this felt like an interrogation. She glanced at Janelle, who sat rigid, eyes narrowed. Matt continued. "There was an internal alert in the booking system related to your reservation. I need to verify some information." Lyric swallowed. We have valid tickets. Our father booked them. He is the CEO of this airline." Matt's expression remained neutral, almost unreadable. "I'm aware of that, but protocol requires I verify every detail." He pulled out a small tablet and began tapping, scrolling through data that only he could access. His fingers hovered over the screen as if searching for something. Janelle leaned forward, voice steady but edged with frustration. "We've shown our boarding passes and IDs multiple times. What else do you need?" Matt looked up. "This isn't about you personally. The system flagged your reservation for potential fraud due to inconsistencies." Lyric's mind raced. They had prepared for skepticism, for dismissal, but not this overt questioning of their legitimacy. The weight of suspicion pressed down on her like a heavy fog. She reached for her phone, already recording the interaction. "Can you specify what inconsistencies you mean?" Matt hesitated. "I can't disclose all details. Security protocols prevent that." Janelle's voice grew sharper. "So we're guilty until proven innocent." A murmur spread through the nearby passengers. Some whispered. Others pulled out phones. The invisible walls surrounding the twins were becoming cracks in the facade. Lyric's hand shook as she typed a quick message to their father. "They're questioning us again. This is getting worse." Everett Parker's reply came almost immediately. "Stay calm. Help is on the way." Matt's gaze hardened. "I'm going to need you to remain seated while I complete this check." Lyric's eyes met Janelle's. The fight inside them simmered, fueled by exhaustion and fierce resolve. The in-flight compliance officer stood silently for a moment before moving on, his eyes lingering on the twins as if weighing them. Lyric exhaled slowly. "This isn't about tickets or safety," she whispered. "It's about control." Janelle nodded. "It's about whether we belong." The rest of the flight passed in a blur of whispered conversations, furtive glances, and growing tension. Every interaction with the crew was measured, every movement scrutinized. Lyric pulled out her notebook again, jotting down names, times, and observations. Each detail was a piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that exposed the systemic bias woven through the airline's policies and personnel. She thought about their father, how he had quietly taken the helm of Stratus Jetlines, not just to lead, but to change. The burden on his shoulders must be immense, but she knew his determination matched theirs as the plane began its descent toward Seattle. Lyric and Janelle prepared for the next phase of their journey, a confrontation that would test their strength and resilience in ways they had never imagined. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane began its slow descent toward Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Passengers shifted in their seats, buckling seat belts and packing away belongings. Lyric and Janelle Parker sat quietly in a row 27, the economy section that had been forced upon them despite their valid first-class tickets. The soft glow of the overhead reading lamps cast a warm light on their determined faces. Lyric's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from her father, Everett Parker. "Stay calm. Board officials are ready to assist when you land." The words were both comforting and frustrating. They were no closer to resolution, but knowing their father was fighting for them gave them strength. Janelle looked out the window, watching the sprawling cityscape unfold beneath the clouds. The journey had been longer and harder than either of them imagined. The countless snubs, the blatant dismissals, the whispered judgments all played out like a cruel symphony around them. Suddenly, a sharp voice interrupted the relative calm. "Miss Parker." Miss Parker Lyric looked up to see a middle-aged man in a sharply pressed uniform standing just beyond their row. His name tag read, Elias Connors. He held a small device in his hand and wore the unmistakable expression of someone who believed his authority was absolute. "Yes, that's me," Lyric replied cautiously. "I'm with airport security. There's a call for you and your sister on the satellite phone near the cockpit. It's urgent." Janelle's heart jumped. A call from who Elias glanced around nervously, as if expecting an eruption from nearby passengers. "From your father, Sir Everett Parker." Lyric's fingers trembled as she exchanged a look with her sister. Without waiting, she rose and followed Elias toward the front of the plane. The corridor felt narrower than usual, the weight of anticipation heavy in the air. At the cockpit entrance, Elias handed her a headset. "He's waiting. You can talk through here." Lyric placed the headset over her ears. Her father's voice came through immediately, calm but firm. "Girls, I'm glad you're okay. I've been monitoring everything since you boarded. This treatment is unacceptable." Tears pricked Lyric's eyes. Hearing his voice so familiar, so steady was a balm in the storm. "We're holding," she said quietly, "but it's worse than we thought. They've questioned our tickets, reassigned our seats, and now security is watching us like we're criminals." "I know," Everett replied. "Which is why I've initiated Protocol Alpha. Every Stratus Jetlines flight at every airport is being held until this is resolved." Lyric's breath caught. "You're grounding flights." "Yes, it's the only way to get attention and force change," her father said. "We can't keep sweeping this under the rug." Janelle appeared behind Lyric, her eyes bright with fierce pride. She whispered, "Dad's fighting for us." Everett's voice softened. "You've already shown incredible courage. Keep recording everything. We'll get justice." Lyric nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "We will." The call ended, but the impact lingered. Lyric and Janelle walked back to their seats with a new sense of purpose. They were no longer just two girls struggling to be seen. They were the spark igniting a revolution. As the plane touched down, an announcement echoed over the intercom. Due to an executive directive, all Stratus Jetlines flights are temporarily grounded pending safety verification. We apologize for the inconvenience. The cabin erupted into murmurs of confusion and frustration. But Lyric and Janelle held tight to the knowledge that their fight was no longer theirs alone. Their father's call was a beacon of hope, a promise that the tide was turning. Passengers began pulling out their phones, streaming videos, and sharing stories of the day's events. Social media buzzed with the hashtag #RashStratusStand, spreading like wildfire. Lyric felt a rush of emotion, fear, pride, exhaustion, but above all, determination. They had been invisible for too long. Now, the whole world was watching. The soft click of the overhead bins closing and the murmurs of passengers settling in were drowned out by a sudden sharp tone, an announcement from the cockpit. "Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that due to unforeseen security protocols, our flight will remain on the tarmac until further notice." Lyric and Janelle Parker exchanged weary glances. The tension in the cabin thickened as passengers shifted nervously, many already frustrated by the unexpected delay. As minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the twins sat rigid in their seats. The economy cabin no longer felt like just a place to endure a flight. It had become a battleground. Soon after, a man approached the twins with an air of authority that sent a chill down Lyric's spine. His name tag read Gregory Walsh. The look in his eyes was cold, calculating. He was no stranger to the kind of control wielded by airport officials and airline staff. "We need to speak with you," Gregory said quietly, his voice low but firm. "There are questions about your reservations and boarding passes." Lyric's stomach twisted. After everything they had endured, Another hurdle. She stood slowly, Janelle beside her, eyes fierce but wary. "We've answered every question," Lyric said calmly. "We have valid tickets. Our father is the CEO of Stratus Jet Lines. What more do you need?" Gregory's lips curled into a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "It's not about your tickets. It's about security concerns. Until we can resolve these, you won't be allowed to proceed." Passengers nearby whispered nervously, some glancing toward the twins with curiosity, others with suspicion. Lyric felt the invisible weight of judgment press down harder. Gregory motioned for 2 security officers to join him. The 2 men, Tom Bennett and Frank Miller, approached with measured steps. Their uniforms were crisp, badges gleaming, and their presence alone seemed enough to silence the cabin. Tom spoke first, his voice steady, but carrying an edge of warning. "Ladies, we need your cooperation. Please follow us to a secure area for further questioning." Janelle's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to show fear. "We have done nothing wrong," she said firmly. "Why are we being treated like suspects?" Frank's eyes narrowed. "This is standard procedure for situations flagged by security." Lyric pulled out her phone, voice steady. "We are recording this. Every step." Tom's hand shot out, trying to block the device. "Recording is prohibited in security areas." "We will not be silenced," Lyric replied, stepping back. The cabin around them buzzed with tension as other passengers watched the unfolding scene, some recording on their own devices. The officers exchanged glances, then reluctantly allowed the twins to keep their phones as they escorted them off the plane. Down the jet bridge. The sterile fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Lyric and Janelle were led into a small waiting room. It was cold and stark, a sharp contrast to the warm sunlight that had greeted them hours before. The twins sat side by side on the metal chairs, hands clasped tightly together. The door opened again and Gregory entered, followed by a stern-looking woman introduced as an airline security manager. She studied the twins with a clinical gaze. "This is a necessary precaution. We are ensuring the safety of all passengers." Lyric met her gaze evenly. "Our safety has been compromised by the way we have been treated today." The woman's expression did not soften. "These protocols exist for everyone. We apply them without exception." Janelle's voice trembled, but held firm. "Then why were we singled out? Why were our tickets questioned repeatedly while others were not?" The room fell silent. The stark truth hung between them. The systemic bias cloaked as security was laid bare. Minutes later, a phone call came through. Everett Parker's voice was calm but authoritative. "Release my daughters immediately. This harassment ends now." The security manager hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Very well." As they were escorted back to the plane, the cabin erupted into whispers of support and outrage. Passengers began to openly question the treatment the twins had endured. Lyric and Janelle returned to their seats, weary but unbroken. The sky outside darkened as the plane prepared to finally take off. Though locked mid-air by invisible chains of prejudice and protocol, the twins knew their fight had ignited a flame that could not be extinguished. The plane sat silent on the tarmac beneath the vast gray sky. The low rumble of distant engines, a constant reminder that this was no ordinary delay. Inside the cabin, Lyric and Janelle Parker felt the eyes of the passengers around them, some curious, others sympathetic, and many silent witnesses to the injustice they endured. The announcement had come hours ago from the cockpit. Every Stratus Jet Lines flight across the country was grounded due to an executive order. Passengers were instructed to remain seated, and murmurs of confusion and frustration filled the cabin. Lyric's fingers hovered over her phone, refreshing the live feed she and Janelle had begun earlier. Their story was spreading like wildfire online under the hashtag #BeWowStratusStand. People from all over were tuning in, sharing, commenting, and standing in solidarity. Janelle leaned over, whispering, "Dad's move! It's shaking things up." Lyric nodded, her eyes scanning the comments flooding their feed. Messages of support, calls for justice, and testimonials from others who had faced discrimination with the airline began to pile up. It was overwhelming, but powerful. Suddenly, the cabin door opened, and Marcus Bennett, the airport station manager, stepped aboard. His presence was commanding, but tinged with nervousness. He scanned the cabin, eyes settling on the twins. "Ms. Parker? Ms. Parker," he called, voice steady. "May I speak with you in private?" Lyric and Janelle exchanged a glance. They knew this was the next step. Together, they followed Marcus through the narrow aisle toward the rear of the plane, where a small office was reserved for official meetings. Inside, Marcus wasted no time. "I want to personally apologize for the treatment you've received today. This does not reflect the values we strive for at Stratus Jetlines." Lyric's jaw tightened. Apologies are a start, but actions speak louder. Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of their words. "I agree. That's why I'm here to inform you that an internal investigation has been launched. Everyone involved will be held accountable." Janelle crossed her arms. "Will those employees face consequences?" "What about systemic changes?" "The investigation will be thorough," Marcus assured them, "and we're already implementing mandatory anti-discrimination training for all staff. Our policies are being reviewed and revamped." Lyric took a deep breath. It was a small victory, but the road ahead was long. Back in their seats, the twins noticed a shift among passengers. Conversation sparked around them. Stories were shared, and the quiet solidarity was palpable. Just then, a young man from the row behind approached. "I'm Malik. I want you to know, I've seen this happen before. It's not right." Lyric smiled faintly. "Thank you. That means a lot." Malik nodded. "We all have to stand together." The plane's cabin had transformed from a place of isolation to a community of witnesses and allies. The power of shared experience was becoming clear. Hours later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We will soon be departing. Please prepare for takeoff." As the plane roared to life, Lyric looked over at Janelle. Despite the day's trials, their bond remained unshaken. They had been grounded by injustice, but their spirits soared. The plane climbed steadily, breaking through thick layers of clouds into a clear blue sky. Inside the cabin, the tension from earlier hours had begun to ease, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. Lyric and Janelle Parker sat close together, their hands still trembling slightly from the day's events, but steady in their resolve. The story of their ordeal had exploded across social media platforms, news outlets, and even corporate boardrooms. The hashtag #StratusStand trended nationally, bringing unprecedented attention to systemic discrimination within the airline industry. Lyric scrolled through her feed, amazed by the flood of messages. Passengers shared stories of similar experiences. Employees anonymously revealed workplace biases. Advocates called for change. It was a wave that could no longer be ignored. Janelle leaned over. People are finally listening. This might actually change things. Lyric nodded. It has to. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, their demeanor noticeably different. Some offered apologetic smiles, while others avoided eye contact, weighed down by the scrutiny their airline now faced. Claudette Monroe appeared again, stopping briefly at their row. Her expression was soft, a mix of regret and support. "I wanted to thank you for your courage," she said quietly. "You've made us all see the truth." Lyric smiled faintly. "It's only the beginning." Meanwhile, back on the ground, the impact of the grounding order was rippling through airports nationwide. Stratus jet lines faced mounting pressure from shareholders, regulators, and the public. Emergency board meetings were convened, and executives scrambled to manage the crisis. Everett Parker, the twins' father, remained a steady force. He appeared in interviews and press conferences, articulating a clear vision for reform. "This is not just about one flight or two passengers," he stated firmly. "It's about confronting systemic issues that have been ignored for far too long. We owe it to our customers, employees, and communities to do better." His words resonated widely, signaling a shift in corporate culture that extended beyond Stratus jet lines. Back on the plane, Lyric and Janelle prepared for landing. As the aircraft descended toward Seattle, the sisters reflected on how far they had come in just one day. Janelle sighed. "I never imagined a flight could change so much." Lyric smiled. "Sometimes, the smallest moments spark the biggest fires." As the plane touched down, the cabin erupted in applause, passengers recognizing the courage it took to stand up and the power of collective action. The journey was far from over, but the Parker twins knew that by refusing to be invisible, they had become catalysts for a new chapter one, where dignity, respect, and justice might finally take flight. The terminal buzzed with activity as Lyric and Janelle Parker stepped off the plane and into the bustling Seattle airport. The air felt different, charged with possibility and change. The journey they had endured was far more than a flight delay or a seating dispute. It was a catalyst, a spark igniting conversations and actions far beyond their own experience. Their phones continued to buzz incessantly. Messages of support, news updates, and invitations to speak at forums and panels filled their inboxes. The story of the two sisters who refused to be invisible had captured hearts and minds nationwide. As they made their way through the crowd, Everett Parker, their father and CEO of Stratus Jet Lines, was waiting for them. His face showed the fatigue of a man who had battled battles both public and private, but his eyes shone with pride. "Welcome home," he said softly, embracing them both. "You've done something remarkable." Lyric smiled through the exhaustion. "We couldn't have done it without you." Everett shook his head. "No, this was your fight from the start. You showed the courage so many lack." That evening, the family gathered in a quiet conference room at the airport. The atmosphere was a mix of relief and determination. Executives, legal advisors, and civil rights advocates joined the Parkers to discuss the next steps. The plan was ambitious. Mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees would roll out immediately. An independent oversight committee would be established to investigate complaints and recommend reforms. Policies would be rewritten with equity at their core. Marcus Bennett, the airport station manager who had spoken with the twins on the plane, was there too. He offered a sincere apology and pledged his commitment to change. Lyric listened carefully, realizing that while individual apologies mattered, systemic transformation required sustained effort and accountability. Later, in a press conference that evening, Everett Parker addressed the media. His voice was steady and resolute. "This incident is a symptom of a deeper problem," he said. "Our airline, like many others, must confront biases ingrained in policies, practices, and culture. We are committed to leading that change, not just for our passengers, but for our entire industry. Reporters pressed for details, questions volleying back and forth. The Parkers answered with honesty and conviction, aware that their words could shape the future of travel and civil rights. That night, as the airport quieted, Lyric and Janelle reflected on the long road ahead. Change would not come overnight, and there would be resistance. But they felt ready. For every injustice they had faced, there was a community now standing with them. For every moment of invisibility, there was now visibility and voice. They were no longer just passengers on a plane. They were pioneers at the gate of a new era. The sun was just beginning to rise over Seattle, casting golden light through the expansive windows of the airport terminal. Lyric and Janelle Parker sat quietly at Gate 42, the very place where their journey had taken a difficult turn months earlier. This time, however, the atmosphere was different, lighter, hopeful, and filled with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Their first-class boarding passes were in their hands once more, but this time, no questions were asked. The gate agent, a warm and professional woman named Priya Sharma, smiled as she scanned their tickets. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Parker. Ms. Parker, Boston awaits." Lyric exchanged a glance with Janelle, a smile tugging at her lips. It was a small moment, but deeply symbolic. After all they had endured, this was not just a flight, it was a statement. As they walked down the jet bridge and stepped onto the plane, the cabin buzzed with activity. The same seat numbers that had once been a source of frustration now felt like a victory. The soft leather beneath their fingertips, the attentive smiles from flight attendants, and the quiet hum of engines all whispered of progress. Claudette Monroe, the purser who had shown them kindness earlier, greeted them at the entrance. "It's good to see you again," she said gently. "The airline has changed because of you." Lyric nodded, touched by the sincerity. "We couldn't have done it without everyone who stood with us." Janelle settled into her seat, pulling out her notebook. Despite the hardships, their commitment to change remained as strong as ever. Documenting, speaking out, and demanding justice was a lifelong journey. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Welcome aboard Stratus Jetlines Flight 237 to Boston Logan International. We are cleared for takeoff and anticipate a smooth flight. Thank you for flying with us." As the plane lifted off, soaring into the open sky, Lyric looked out the window at the receding city below. The view was breathtaking, but it was more than just scenery. It was a metaphor for the journey they had taken and the one still ahead. Back on the ground, the impact of their stand continued to ripple through the airline industry. Other carriers began reviewing their own policies. Employees spoke out about experiences long ignored, and regulators increased oversight. The conversation around equity and dignity in travel had shifted from whispered complaints to national discourse. Everett Parker's leadership was widely praised for turning crisis into opportunity. His vision for an inclusive airline industry set a new standard, inspiring companies across sectors to reflect and reform. Lyric and Janelle knew the road would not be without setbacks. Change was often slow, and old prejudices were stubborn. But the power of their story, the strength of their voices, and the support of a growing community gave them hope. As the plane touched down in Boston, the sisters felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and anticipation. This trip was no longer just a college visit. It was a testament to resilience and the unyielding fight for justice. They stepped off the aircraft, ready to face the world with heads held high. Their past challenges had forged them into warriors of dignity and change. The flight ahead was clear one of hope, courage, and transformation. Lyric and Janelle's story is a powerful reminder that discrimination is not just an abstract injustice. It's a lived reality that can shatter hopes and silence voices if left unchallenged. Yet, through their resilience and quiet strength, these two young women show us that standing up for dignity can transform not only individual lives, but entire industries. Their journey invites us to look inward and confront the biases that persist in places we often take for granted. As we close this chapter, we honor their courage and call on all of us to refuse silence in the face of injustice. It is a shared responsibility to create spaces where everyone is seen, heard, and respected. The fight is far from over, but stories like Lyric and Janelle's give us hope and a roadmap for a more just and inclusive future. Thank you for witnessing their journey with us. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge injustice and celebrate the human spirit. Together, we can keep the conversation alive and the fight for fairness burning bright. Stay tuned. Our next video continues to explore stories of courage and change that matter. You won't want to miss it.